Thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. We're going to be going over kind of a functionality overview of the functions that are available to people with the communications director role inside their organization. Before we get rolling straight into the webinar, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. As you've probably noticed, all of your mics are muted. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please enter them in the chat. There's no need to save them for the end. We've got one of my favorite ClubExpress teammates, Samantha, in the chat. She will be there to answer related questions throughout, and then any kind of important questions that come up throughout or at the end, we will take a bit of time for a Q&A towards the end to make sure that we address those questions. There's also going to be a recording of this and our other webinars on our YouTube channel. You can get to our YouTube channel by going to YouTube and searching for clubexpress.com. That's with the dot spelled out. So that's clubexpress.com. And while you're there, go ahead and subscribe so that whenever we have version announcements or new webinars or new training videos that get posted, you'll see those on your YouTube feed so you can stay up to date on the changes and updates and fixes that we apply to the ClubExpress tool. So there's our clubexpress.com. So that's clubexpress.com. We have a few upcoming webinars. We've got in October our Managing Contacts webinar, and we've got our Documents, Do's, and Don'ts webinar. Those will be taking place in October. If you want to register ahead of time and put in any questions or information, you can find those at clubexpress.com/calendar, or you can just go to clubexpress.com and click on the calendar option in the upper right of the screen. We will be taking a break from webinars in November. The reason for that is that we have one of our kind of semi-annual boot camp style kind of event drills things going on. We're going to be doing, those of you who attended our design drills or one of our previous boot camps will be familiar with the way this works, but we do kind of like a really in-depth deep dive training course on kind of like getting really, really detailed on how to do things. And we'll be doing a kind of like 5-part series on using getting the most out of the events module. That'll be starting November 2nd. If you want to register, we've got some information on clubexpress.com. We do have special pricing for that. So it's going to be, I believe, $129.99. And until September 27th, that's actually $30 off for just $99 if you want to register for that. But again, that's a 5-part kind of super detailed crash course on our events module. So that'll be happening in November. All right, so today we're going over some of the kind of controls that our membership directors have. We're going to be, or not our membership directors, some of our communications directors have. We're going to be going over things like the mailing list and our email account forwarding. We're going to take a look, really kind of spending a lot of our time in the emailing module because a lot of the terms that are important in emailing are going to apply to a lot of the other tools, specifically the text messaging and in-app notifications. Those 3 modules work very similar to each other. So we'll spend a lot of time in emailings and then go over and reapply what we learned in emailings to our text messaging and in-app notification options. For in-app notifications and text messaging, those are both kind of like added cost options for communications. The text messaging option is optional for any of our clubs to turn on. I believe it's $2 per month just to reserve the phone number. And then depending on your location, there is a small fee per text message. I believe for most people in the US, it's going to be about 2 cents per text message, but double check the pricing in your region because that is, occasionally subject to change depending on where you're located. And then in-app notifications, that's going to be for the users of ClubExpress that have a mobile app. You can actually use push notifications. So instead of doing a text message, you can say, hey, everyone who's got the app installed, I want to send a push notification to their phone. We'll also be taking a look at the system emails, how to modify them and manage them and see what system emails go out when. And we'll take a look at the blogs and news articles section. And I also wanted to point out, whenever we do kind of these overviews for specific roles within organizations, we also like to point out where those roles overlap with other roles. For communications, that overlaps a lot with the membership director. So, sometimes we do find that the communications director and the membership director can be the same person from time to time. But if your organization has a large kind of a administrative team, you may be working closely specifically with the membership director, because a lot of the communication tools are tied into, making sure you have correct lists for your membership. And we'll talk about how to take advantage of the things that your membership director might have access or control over for your communication needs. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is our mailing list options. Mailing lists are kind of just categorizations of members and non-members. So again, mailing lists can apply to any user. They don't necessarily have to be a member. And those are categorizations that can be used for a number of purposes. They can be used in emails, text messages, and in-app notifications. So if you're trying to send an email out to a specific group of people, mailing lists are one of the ways you can subcategorize your members or your non-members to target them based on certain criteria. The mailing list can also be used for filtering reports and exports. So whenever you're running reports, say in the People tab, or you're in the data export section of the control panel, you'll notice there's an option to say for some of the reports, hey, I'm only looking for information on people in this specific category. So that's another use of mailing lists. Mailing lists are an interesting tool because they can be manually edited. But most times, most organizations use mailing lists in kind of an automatic way. So those of you who have created events before or have set up any sort of surveys or forms have probably noticed that there's a section that says mailing list category. And if you leave it alone, as most people do, whenever someone signs up for an event, they are automatically added to the event registrant mailing list. And then you have kind of a running list of everyone that has signed up for an event in your organization. That's just one of the many ways that you can use mailing lists, but it is also a manual tool. So there's an option on a lot of our websites when you're not logged in as a member that says add me to a mailing list at the top of your screen. That is one way a non-member can add themselves to a mailing list. Admins can also go into the people manager. So this is another place where it ties in with the membership director. A membership director or anyone with access to the people manager can also go in and add an individual member or non-member to a specific mailing list of their choice, or you can do so in bulk. And now I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we did have a webinar very recently on a new function of our people manager called the actions button. And that actions tool will let you add groups of people that you've searched for in the people manager to a specific mailing list. So let me go ahead and hop over to my web browser, and I'll do a quick demonstration of how the mailing list tool works. Before I get into the demo, I do want to kind of preface this. I'm going over a lot of different modules today, so this isn't going to be like one of our deep dive modules where I'm going to touch every single setting inside of a module. We're going to be really doing a function overview of what functions are available. So if there's something that I don't go quite as deep as you would like, feel free to ask questions in the chat. But also we have webinars on most of the topics individually that we'll be going over today. This is just kind of meant as, a starting point for a lot of our communications directors. So let's hop over. Let me change my screen really quick. I'm going to go over to our demo club. Those of you who have looked at our webinars before will probably be familiar with the Northwest Balloon Club. I'm currently logged in as everyone's favorite administrator, Martin Smith. You can see that up here in the corner. If we're taking a look at mailing lists, the first place we're going to go is the control panel. And because we're looking at communication directors today, we're going to spend a majority of our time over here in the communications tab of the control panel. Once we're in the control panel, you will find your mailing list options down here under the setup section called mailing list categories. This is where that's going to live. And when you click on mailing list categories, you'll see a list of available categories. Now, some of these categories are already going to be included for you, especially the ones like event registrants, gift purchaser, sponsors. A lot of those are going to be system added mailing list categories. And then some of these will be you'll see there are some that say, for example, here it says all the Smiths and Jones. That's obviously a manually created category. So you'll already have a few categories that are kind of built into the system, but you can create your own. So if you wanted to create an extra categorization for members or non-members, you can click this add category button. And when you're creating a category, all you have to do is give it a name and choose whether or not it shows up on the admin screen. That's all there is to setting up a new category. It's very, very simple. Once you give it a name, this little checkbox here, this just determines whether or not this is a category for people who are viewing your website to add themselves to it. So what that essentially means is when it says add me, If we're logged out of the website, you'll see a button up here in the top left corner that can be added as a part of your template builder. And we have an entire separate webinar on using the template builder, but most of you will have this on by default. When you're logged out, there's a button that says add me to your mailing list. So that's a way for people who discover your website or people who visit your website for the first time who are possibly interested in getting involved in your organization but aren't members yet. They can say, hey, add me to your mailing list. And so you could have categories such as, upcoming events. You could have categories, such as volunteering opportunities or whatever possible options you would want to allow people to add themselves. And if you check this add me button, this little box, then that's an option that people can get added to that mailing list when they become interested in your organization. If you leave it unchecked, then non-members who visit your site won't have that as an option to be added to that mailing list. So if it's something that we're using, specifically for members or specifically as an admin direct control, we might want to leave that unchecked so that we can have, more fine detail control over that function. Once we've started creating these categories and we have them here, we can do a few things with them. So on this screen, we can click on an eyeball option, and that will let us see who is in that category. So for this category right here, if we click on this eyeball, we'll see a list of all of the people that are in this category. Now, these functions I'm showing off right now are fairly new. This eyeball is only a couple months old. We used to not be able to go in and just look at a list of people in here. So that's a new function. And from here, we can actually manually add an individual person to this list, or we can also remove individual people. So we can say, hey, I don't want, this particular person. Hey, I don't want this Brady on this Smith's mailing list. Maybe I'm going to, change the mailing list up. I can also click on a pencil and look at the information about that person. Now, if they are a member, it will take us to their member profile. And if they are a non-member, it'll just open up their non-member information. So again, clicking on this pencil, this person is a non-member. And so it just opens up their non-member info. If they are a member, it'll take us over to their member profile to edit. Now, keep in mind, if you don't have access to edit member profiles, it might give you a little pop-up screen that lets you know that you can't get to that page. The other option we can do is we can click on the email option, and we can just start crafting an email to that person. Now, when I click on it, it opens up Outlook for me because I have Outlook installed on my computer. This is just a simple hyperlink to someone's email address. So this isn't going to use the ClubExpress emailing tool. This is going to use whatever email tool you have on your device. So if you're on an iPhone, it might open up Apple Mail. If you're on an Android phone, it might open up Gmail. Whatever device you're on, it'll try to use an email associated with that. A slightly different option, if we're back on this screen, we have the same icon. So after the eyeball, we have this little email icon. Now, this one functions slightly differently. So when we are on the eyeball and we were looking at individual people, clicking on that letter icon would take us to, our devices emailing. But because when we click on this, it's going to be emailing a group of people, instead of sending us to our built-in tool, it's actually going to take us to the ClubExpress Blast email tool. So if I kind of click on, this group here, it's got 7 people in it. If I click on this email option right here, it's going to take us to our emailing module. And now I'm not going to spend too much time here because we're going to be coming back to this page in just a few minutes, but you'll notice on those pages, those of you who have used the emailing tool before, our distribution list is already checked off as though it's been completed. And if we take a look at it, we'll see we've added 2 different options to it. One of these is for members and one of these is for non-members. So it's adding both members and non-members that are inside that category. So that's one way we can use mailing lists. We can very quickly start an email, and this is just going to take us into our emailing tool to begin crafting an email to that specific group. We've got 2 other icons to pay attention to. We've got this little reports icon, and this will let us print out mailing address labels. So if you have one of the printers listed here, so Avery, or I can't remember the name for these, but these are 2 different formats of kind of mailing address label printers. You can print out physical addresses. Now, this is going to pull physical address information for these people. So if you have a mailing list and you want to do a paper mailing, this is an option to print out labels for paper mailing for all of these people. Now, obviously, if people don't have a physical address in their information, then it's not going to, print out correctly for that particular person. But anyone who has a physical address listed, it's going to print out the mailing list, for those people. So it will correctly pull anyone who has a physical address listed. And then the last icon here is our little export icon for each of these. If you wanted to pull their contact info, so obviously the reports is for printing physical addresses. If we just want a roster of people in those categories, you can click this little export option, and you'll see up here in the upper right-hand corner, I get a little download. It says mailing list category, and it's going to give me an Excel sheet for all of the contact info for the people in that mailing list. So that's going to be both things like phone number, email, and address. So it's going to give me an Excel sheet export that I can use for that. So that's our mailing.
Would you, I'm so sorry, would you mind magnifying your screen ever so slightly?
There we go. How's that?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the mailing list categories page. Before I leave this page, there's one thing we can do here. We can also do this on another page. So I'm going to show you two ways to do it. We can also import people from this page. So whenever we import people, keep in mind that we are only importing non-members. So if you are going to import non-members, it's only going to pull people into your non-member database. You cannot import members. Members have to be added one by one, other than your first initial member bulk upload. So this is going to be an option to import non-members into your database. If we look at import people, you will see an option to select a category. So this is going to select what category am I adding this group of people to? And then you'll select a file, and that's going to be an Excel file that you'll need to upload with the information about those people. Now, there is information in our help system with the non-member template to kind of like plug that information into. So you can find that over here by clicking on the question mark. If you go to our help system for our mailing list page, you'll find the import documents on our downloads information. But more importantly, there's an easier place to find that download without having to go to the help system. If we go over to our people manager, so even though you're a communications director, if you have access to the people manager, or if you're closely tied to the membership director who has access to the people manager, if we hop back to the control panel and go over to people and click into the people manager, we will also find a non-member option over here. And there's an option to do import non-members. And that is the same tool as we were looking at before. And this is where we can also upload that document. Oh, this changed a little bit. This used to have the template there. So now that template, I guess, just only lives over in the help system over.
Sorry, the reason we don't have the template on that page is we have instruction text turned off. So just a quick note to folks, for those of you who turn off instruction text on your website, which you can do through website look and feel, that template won't appear within the download options. But yes, you can access it through our help system.
Okay. So yeah, so when you're on the help system, if you go just to the home section of the help system, you'll find this section that says downloads, and we can read more about it. And there's our non-member contact template. So we can just download that template, and that's going to be an Excel template that we can plug our non-member information into and then upload into our website. So yeah, those of you who don't have instruction text turned off, you would see right up here at the top, there's some instruction text, including a download link for that template as well. So if you have the instruction text on, like we don't, then you would have an option to download it right here without going through the help system. But then it's just a matter of selecting what category you are assigning those people to and selecting the file. And you would just re-upload that template with the non-member information you are interested in loaded into that template. While I'm on the people manager and on the topic of mailing lists, we also have the new actions button. So if we search for a group of people, let's say we're going to search for, well, let's not select category. Let's say we're going to search for all of our secondary members. Once we have searched for a group of people and we have, a selection of results, so there's 6 people on this list. If we wanted to add all 6 of these people in these search results to a mailing list, the actions button that is new right here, right over here next to the page select, we have actions. You have an option that says add to existing mailing list or create a new mailing list for these results. And so I could create a new mailing list, or I could select an existing mailing list and add this group of people to it. So for now I could say, these are all secondary members. So I can say secondaries. And I'll save. And that process will run. It will create a new mailing list and it will load these 6 people into it. So if I go back to my mailing list in my control panel under communications and hop over to mailing lists, now I should have secondaries, and we can see that there are 6 people in that mailing list. So that's kind of like a quick overview of how mailing list functions. Now I can use this to, send emails to secondaries, or I can alter this list. I can use this however I see fit. I can run reports on, specific secondaries, whatever I am interested in using this mailing list category for. All right. So the next section we're going to talk about is our email accounts and how email account forwarding works. If we head back to our control panel, we're staying in the communications tab. A lot of you will know about the under the setup section, the email accounts page. Now, this one's hard for us to demo because our demo test club doesn't have a domain setup. So when I click on email accounts, I'm going to be greeted with a blank page. So I'm going to switch back to my PowerPoint so I can show you some screenshots that I took from this page. So normally on this page on your website, if you have a domain setup, let me share my PowerPoint. If you have a domain setup, you'll see this kind of table. It's going to say account, forwarded to, and then it's going to have a few icons over on the right-hand side. What this page does is it lets you set up domain email accounts. So if instead of using the, myclub.clubexpress.com, if you have, say, myclub.com, you will have the option through ClubExpress when we're managing your domain to have us forward emails. Now, this is an option only a handful of organizations. Well, I would say it's actually closer to like 50-50. Some organizations will use services like GoDaddy, or maybe they have, a Google Suite set up. They'll have some sort of third-party email inbox where they will have emails to specific accounts get forwarded. But if you don't have one of those options, you can instead use ClubExpress to forward incoming emails. So you'll see here what we've got is a few emails set up, and by default, you get 5 email addresses. And so we've got our test info at Big Ben. This is one of our test websites. And we can say, anytime someone sends an email to this test info email address, instead of showing up in an inbox for test info, it's just going to automatically forward that email to these addresses. And you'll notice we've actually got 2 addresses here. So, for our treasurer, this is just going to one email address, but we can just separate email addresses by a semicolon and send to multiple. So anytime someone sends an email to this top one that says test info, it's going to send a copy of that email that gets sent there, one to somebody at Gmail and one to nobody at yahoo.com. So we can have that email get sent to everyone it pertains to. So you can have, board@myclub.com, and it can go to every individual board member's email address. It's a pretty simple setup. All you do is you just hit add. So you'll see these last 2 on this section are currently unassigned. You would just hit this little envelope icon to create a new email. You would fill in what the email name is going to be. So, my email would be, Devin at clubexpress.com. So if we have, clubexpress.com, I would just put Devin here. I would select our domain. Some of our organizations will have multiple domains, so you'll have this drop down to select from. Most organizations just have one, and so it would be auto selected for you, just whatever your single domain that you have is. And you'll see a preview. So for the example, email name, using the domain abcdef, that creates the email name at abcdef.com. And then we just select where those emails are supposed to go. So for this example, on this email setup, anytime someone emails email name at abcdef.com, it's going to take that email, forward it to person at Gmail, and also forward it to somebody at Yahoo. So it's going to create multiple copies of that email for everyone to go to. Now, keep in mind, once those are forwarded, it is no longer treating it as having gone to email name. So if once you get it in your inbox, say person@gmail.com, once it's in that inbox, if you reply to it, that reply is coming from person@email.com. You're not able to reply as though it's coming from email name at abcdef. A useful tool, a useful way to use this, though, is when you're using the ClubExpress Blast emailing tool, what we're going to go over next. When you are using this, you can send emails as though they're coming from this forwarding address. And then anytime someone replies to the blast email you send out as though it came from this address, then it can go back to all of those people. So you can have an email look like it's coming from board. And then anytime someone replies to that email, replying to, the board@yourclub.com, it can then go to all of the members of the board. So that's just kind of an interesting interconnectivity there. So speaking of the blast emailing tool, that's what we're going to go over next. This is going to be the next thing we're going to quickly cover is our emailing module. So the emailing module is a way for us to send blast emails out to groups of people, either members or non-members, in our database. This is a really powerful tool because you can create reusable email templates and distribution lists. So unlike some email tools, ours isn't necessarily just a list of names. There's a lot of data in our ClubExpress databases. And so you can use that dynamically. So you can say, instead of saying, I want to send this to Joe and Steve and, Sam and whoever else, you can say, I want to send this to all of my members, that are expiring in the next 6 months. And the system will get that list for you. You don't have to go find that information. And then similarly, once you create a distribution list like that, you can save it and reuse those parameters over and over. So you don't have to go through the elbow grease of creating that list every time. And similarly, if you're a type of organization that sends out, regular newsletters, you can create, a nice looking template, and you can just copy and paste that template every time. So you don't have to, make the email from scratch over and over. There is also an option with our emailing module to allow users who have received emails to see those emails on the website. So they don't necessarily have to see it in their inbox. If they accidentally delete an email they received, if that email was set up to be allowed to be viewed on the website, they can actually just go and look at an emailing page. And I'll show you what that looks like as well. And once you've sent an email, there's also a lot of reporting tools for things like, has the email been sent? Did it get through? Did someone open that email? And we can also report on, if someone's email address isn't functioning correctly. I've also got a tip over here. This is one of the places where you're going to probably want to work closely with your membership director. So making sure that your membership information is up to date and accurate will make sure that your emailings get to the right people. And there's also some interesting ways you can use the tool. So additional member data, a lot of our organizations take advantage of that. It's a way for you to ask kind of organization specific questions of your members, and you can target specific answers to that or include those answers in your emails. So, an example that I always use, like if you have an organization with, maybe various languages, you can say, I want to send a Spanish version of my newsletter. And you can say, this is going to all of my members that, listed in their database, listed in their, additional member data that they speak Spanish. And so you can target those specifically and make sure that they're getting, a version, in their native language. So let's kind of switch over. Let's take a look at what it looks like to create an emailing. So let me change my screen one more time. So now if we go back to our control panel, surprise, surprise, once again, we're still in the communications section of the control panel. The emailing tool is going to be right here under website modules. And it's the first module right here. It says emailing. When we click into emailing, this is the page we're going to land on. It's going to have this kind of search box where we can filter down our search results of all of our draft email page and all of our previously sent emails. You can filter that down by date sent, or you can filter it down by subject or category. But most times I just kind of leave that blank and hit search to look at all of the emails that are kind of like in draft or previously sent. You can also, on this page, configure a few options. So I'm not going to go through all of the different configuration tools today. We have separate webinars on emailing that go through all of the kind of configuration details. But I will point out a few interesting options and really important ones in our configure tool here. The two most important ones that I see are templates and save distribution lists. So whenever you're creating an email, there's an option to save the distribution list of that email as a saved distribution list to be reused. And there's also an option when you're creating an email to save the body of that email as a template. Now, once you start doing that a lot, you might accidentally build up too many, maybe multiple of the same type of distribution lists or too many templates, and it's hard to choose between. If you ever wanted to go and modify or remove saved distribution lists or templates, this is where you would go to do that. So if we click on templates here, we can see here's all the templates that we've made on our website. You'll notice there are some templates that ClubExpress preloads for you. These are just good jumping off points, and you can use these to create future templates. Those are just kind of system built-in ones, but these are all the ones that we've created. And if I decide, hey, I don't need 2 copies of a plain text email template, I can come in here and delete it or repurpose it by hitting the pencil to edit it. Or if I wanted to say, hey, there's this webinar newsletter that I want to reuse multiple times, I can copy it and make new versions of it. So that's where I can go in to manage my templates. And then similarly with save distribution lists, this is where I can go in and do the same thing. I can come in here and I can remove distribution lists or modify them if I need to update the parameters. These are all of the distribution lists that have been saved. But as I mentioned, you can both create new distribution lists and new templates while you are creating an emailing. So that's the most important thing we'll be doing, is actually making an emailing. So when I start an email, we're going to land on this page, and creating an email has kind of 3 primary questions that's going to ask us. It's going to ask us for some basic information. It's going to ask us who this email is going to, and it wants to know what's the body of that email. Those are the 3 sections we need to configure in order to send an email out. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to edit our basics. We're going to do something like select a category. Now you can create as many or as few email categories as you want. It's also going to ask us, and this is something I mentioned just a few minutes ago, allowed on view email page. So if we leave this checked, and if it's a category that is allowed to be viewed on the view email page, that means members who receive this email will also be able to see this email on the view email page. And I'll be showing you what that looks like in just a few minutes, but there's really not any harm, unless it's a time-sensitive email, to leaving that checked and allowing members who receive the email to see it. Now, keep in mind, only members who are on the recipient list for that email are going to see it. If we send an email to, all of our active members, and someone who wasn't active at the time then, becomes active later, because they weren't on the recipient list, they're not going to be able to see that on the view email page. There's also going to be a section to fill in a from address. Now we can type in whatever email address we want here. We can make this email look like it's coming from whoever or wherever we want. That does seem like it's open to abuse, but keep in mind, anyone who is even, moderately savvy will see that when they receive the email, it's going to be kind of in brackets, and then off to the right-hand side, it's going to show the ClubExpress email server. So they'll be able to tell that this email isn't necessarily natively coming from Samantha at ClubExpress. It's going to be coming from, Samantha at ClubExpress via ClubExpress.com's email server. So it won't look, perfectly native to that. But if someone were to reply to the email, that is the address that it would go to. Same with setting up a from name. You can just say, who is this email coming from? And then we have this option here where we can send now or send on a future date. Now, saying send now doesn't mean it's going to hit right now. It just means when we're done and we say this email is ready to go, that is when the email is going out. Or we can say we want to save this email for a future date, and we can add it to the schedule. So we can, say I want this email to go out, next Friday at 9:30 a.m. and that is when the email will go out. Keep in mind, and there's a little note about this, this time is based on the email server, the ClubExpress email server time, which is Central Time. So those of you not in Central Time need to make sure that if you're scheduling an email for a very specific time, you want to adjust your timing here to fit the fact that the email server is in Central Time. Obviously, we need to select an email subject. There's an option to CC or BCC certain emails. If the email you're thinking of CCing or BCCing is someone in your database, you may not need to do that. You can just include them. The primary reason someone might CC is that if you want to make sure that if someone hits reply all, that they get that email as well, then you can include them as a CC here. But blind copy is really only useful if you're trying to send this email to someone who isn't necessarily in your database already. For our content, you've got the option to send as HTML or send as plain text. I always leave it as HTML. If you leave it as plain text, a lot of the information gets stripped out. So you're not going to be able to do fonts, or you're not going to be able to do, colors or images or links. It's just plain text. So I always usually leave it as HTML so that I have things like font controls and image controls. And then you get these 3 little check boxes here. You get the option to set an urgent flag. I usually recommend against setting the urgent flag unless it is truly, truly urgent. If you send a lot of urgent emails, a lot of times if you send them back to back to back and you send urgent emails, someone's email provider might eventually say, hey, we get so many urgent emails from this address, we're not going to deliver it because we think it's spam. So that's sending a ton of urgent emails is a pretty quick way to get filtered into a spam box. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to abuse that. It's fine to use every once in a while if it's truly urgent, but that's something that use sparingly. These next two are two boxes that I usually check by default. So we have this track opens. I love turning this on. It'll add a little HTML tag to the email body. And anytime someone opens the email, it's going to track, it's going to report back to the emailing module that it has been opened by that person. And whenever you are also tracking opens, there's an option to resend that email. So if we say, resend it 2 days later, anyone who hasn't opened the email, so anyone who, we don't receive information that they've tracked that open, we will send that email to them again. So if you do open it and our system sees that you opened it, you're not going to get the email a second time. But if you don't open that email, then you're going to get the email again. That is a more useful way to make sure that people are getting your emails, in my opinion, than using the set urgent flag. That way, if someone just happened to miss it, we'll send it again. One quick note about this, there are some privacy settings specifically related to Apple where if you set your privacy settings to a certain level of strictness, it may not report back to us when they open it. And if that's the case, then there's not a way for us to tell that they've opened it or not. And so if we resend it, they would get that email even if they did open it. Now, that is a relatively small portion of email recipients, and we haven't really gotten reports of that being much of a problem. It's just something to keep in mind that it's not always going to be 100% accurate, and there's not really anything we can do about that. That's a decision on the Apple side, so we can't really, make changes that way. So just keep in mind, you want to go like pointing fingers and say, hey, you didn't read my email. Maybe they did. There's a chance they did, and their email provider just didn't let us know. The personalization allowed option, there's no harm in checking this. This just adds an option to insert personal information into the email. Most often this gets used to personalize the email in an addressing way. So you can say, instead of hello members, you can say, hello, John. It's a way to kind of make sure that each person gets a personalized email instead of kind of a general email. So we'll save that option. I have to put in a subject. I'll say test email. I'll save. Once I've got my basic information configured, I get a little check mark. Now we also have to set up a distribution list. So if we come over here and hit edit distribution list, we'll get two options. We can use a distribution list that's already been created. So here's all of our distribution lists that have been saved before, or we can create a new list. If we choose this second option, this will give us our little selection tool where we can go in and select different criteria to send an email by. So you'll see the default is active solo and primary members. That's going to be all of our primary members that are currently active. When we click this dropdown, we get a ton of options. I could spend the rest of our webinar today just going option by option, just letting you know what one means. But for the most part, this is something that you can kind of like play around with on your own. If there's something specific you're looking for, a really interesting note about this, you don't need to hunt through and search for something. So I mentioned earlier that additional member data can be used. So I know that those additional member data questions can be used to target people. So if I'm looking to send something to my Spanish speaking members, instead of just hunting through for questions, I can just type question. And when I start typing, it filters my results to only match things for what I'm typing. So I started typing the word question, and we'll see that we got, let me try that one more time because that little pop-up gets in my way. Questions, we'll see members with specific answer to a club question. So that's my additional member data, and I can select that. And for what question, I can choose languages. And for the answer, now all of our additional member data is stored as text fields in the database. So keep in mind that you're going to have to type that in. So if it's a yes or no question, you would just say no. But for languages, I'm going to say Spanish. And anyone who has Spanish as an answer to their languages question, we can hit add. And now we have, question, languages, answer is Spanish. So anyone who answered Spanish is going to get this email. Now, just because I've hit add here, that doesn't mean that I can only send it to this group. If I wanted to send this to all of my multilingual people, if, let's say I want to target people with multiple answers, I can say, let's also hit our people that speak German. We're just looking to send an email about, being, multilingual in our organization, and we can hit add. And so now this email, every time I hit add on a criteria up here, it's going to include people of all these criteria that fit. So I can say I'm going to send it to my Spanish speakers and my German speakers. And I can do that over and over. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the same thing. I can say I also want to include, all the people in a mailing list category. So here's my mailing list category. So all of my members in a selected category. And I'll say my event registrants. Now that's kind of a nonsensical list of people, but you get the idea. I can make very, very specific kind of groups of people and single them out. Or if I wanted to be slightly more, if I want to target my multilingual people that have yet to show up to an event, I can choose a different option here and I can exclude. So instead of hitting add, I can choose to exclude, and now it'll say excluding category event registrants. So the way this would work, it's going to all of my users that speak Spanish, all of my users that speak German, but it's not going to send it to any of them if they are in the category event registrants. So this would look like, hey, this would be the type of email where I would say, hey, multilingual members, we noticed you haven't signed up for our events before. Would you like to attend an upcoming event where we're going to be featuring, multilingual information or something like that. So you can create really, really, specific mailing list categories. And instead of going through this process every time, I mentioned before that we can save a category once we're using it. So there's this little checkbox below. Once we have our data the way we like it, we can check this box and we can give this a name. We can say, multilingual and, non-events. So this is going to be I can give it a name that's descriptive of the type, and I can save it. And now that I've saved that, the next time I'm creating an event, instead of creating this from scratch, if I look up here in my saved distribution lists, there's that list I just made. And so instead of doing it over and over every time, I can just reuse that list and say, hey, I'm sending an email to that same group of people again, and I can use that option and it'll pull those people. So now we've got our basic info. We've got who this email is going to. The last thing we need to determine is what is the body of this email like? And we can do a lot of things here. Now, this is a place where I'm not going to spend too much time. I'll give you kind of the broad strokes, because the best way to learn this part is just to get in there and play with it. Obviously, as long as I don't hit send, none of these emails are going to go out, especially if I don't set a distribution list or if I don't save my basic info. This is a place where you can just kind of come and play around with the different email editing tools. We've got a lot of different elements here. For the most part, it's just different combinations of text and pictures and links. And you can just kind of put them in different orders and move them around. A very common email that I kind of play around with is using this hero section to start. And then I will, put in some images and some text after that. And so starting with the hero image, the hero section, this is just an image on top of some text. So I might select an image from my database. And those of you who have created a custom page before, this might be a familiar selection tool. This is just our image selection tool. And I can come in here and put my logo in there. So now I've got my Northwest Balloon Club logo up top. And I can say with this second section, this is a text section as a part of my hero section. I can say this is my September newsletter. And I can change the font styles and things like that. And I'll say, this is heading 1, and I will center that. And so now I've got just this top section that says September newsletter. There's my little logo. I can do a picture again, put this little picture of a cabin in there, or I can upload pictures from my computer if I wanted to. But for text, this is where I'll focus in on that personalization option. I can say, normally the bodies of my emails would start with something like, hello, member, and then I would, fill in a bunch of text for whatever my newsletter contents are. Instead of doing hello, member, because in the basic section up here, we checked the personalization allowed, we can actually personalize this email. And so instead of saying hello, member, we can say hello, first name. So you'll see this little insert tag tool up in the upper left. If you don't see this, it's probably because you may not have remembered to check the personalization option. But if you go back and check that personalize option, you'll see this select tag option pop up in all of your text editors. We can say hello first name. Once we've selected what tag we want to add, we want to make sure that your cursor is where you want that tag to go, and then hit insert tag. And it'll plug in this little kind of squiggly line, first name squiggly line thing. This little squiggles, we'll talk about this again in our system emails as well, but this is going to automatically fill when we send the email out. So if I send this out to 20 people, each person is going to get a personalized email. So when I send this email to Joe, it's going to say, hello, Joe. When this email gets in Sam's inbox, it's going to say, hello, Sam, so on and so forth. So each person is going to get their own information fed to them automatically. Now, that is the most common use is, hello first name, but there's a lot of other tools you can use for this. You can include things like their membership number or their address or their join date, their zip code, any, whatever type of information. Oftentimes their expiration date is an important one. So if you want to remind people, hey, this is when you're expiring, you can include their expiration date in the body of the email, letting them know, hey, your expiration is coming up on insert expiration date, and it'll let them know like, oh yeah, I've got 6 months or I've got 2 days. They'll get an email with that information in it for them. Once you've got the body of your email set up the way you like it, you can do a few things. So down here at the bottom, once we've answered those 3 questions, what's the basic info? Where's the email going? What's the body of the email look like? We have some options down here at the bottom. We can hit save and continue. That will just save our progress on this draft. It's not necessary to hit save and continue unless you're spending a long time crafting your body. Keep in mind, this is a web platform. So if you stay on a page without refreshing or anything like that for, more than 20 minutes, there is a chance of a timeout. So if you're spending, 15 to 20 minutes crafting an email, you may want to come down here and hit save and continue to make sure that if you lose internet access or if your page refreshes or something, or if you accidentally close your window, that you're not going to lose your progress. There's also save and close, which is going to say, hey, I like my progress so far, but I'm going to come back to it. It's not ready to go out just yet. We're saving our progress as a draft, and it'll get added to that list of emails that we saw before. We also save as template. This is just going to save the body of our email, and it's going to save it as a template that we can use. So we can say, save this as a template, and I'll say, Devon test. And when I save this, the body of my email gets saved to be reused later. So even if I delete all of this body that I've added in here, if I look at my template section over here next to elements, there's that Devon test template that I just made. And all I have to do is drag that over. And there's all that information again. So I can always use this as a jumping off point. So if I set up a newsletter template, all I have to do is come in here, swap out some pictures, swap out some text, change this to, October, and I've got a new webinar or a new newsletter that I don't have to put quite as much work into. I don't need to go in here and drag out all the correct elements and set all my fonts and do things like that. Go find my logo image. All of those images, all of the shapes, everything is going to get pulled for me. The last 2 buttons down here, send tests and ready for delivery. These are 2 really important buttons. Send tests. I highly, highly, highly recommend sending a test before you hit ready for delivery. The reason is this obviously isn't exactly how this email is going to look. It's got a bunch of editing stuff laid over it. It's got this little resize bar on it. It's got these black bars with all the edit tools. Those aren't going to be included. You want to make sure that the email looks right in your inbox. So when you hit send test, it's going to load your email address, and it's also going to give you a place to include up to 3 other email addresses. So you can send this to yourself and to your team, or you can, be a little bit like me. I have a ClubExpress email, I have a Gmail, I have a Yahoo, I have several different email addresses. And so I will send it to myself multiple times so that I can make sure it looks right in Gmail, it looks right in Yahoo, it looks right in Outlook, it looks right in all my different email platforms. So that way I can, go in here and say, oh, in Gmail, this image looks a little funny. Maybe I can play with it a little bit. Once you've got the email, once you've gotten your test email and everything looks correct, you can then go over to ready for delivery. And if you hit ready for delivery, it will send your email if you have it set for going now. So if we look at our basic info, again, we have this option to send now or send on this date and time. If I say send on this date and time, it will get scheduled for this date and time. So at 9:30 on the 29th, this email will go out. If I had set it to now, it would queue for delivery immediately. Now, here's a really important note that some people miss for scheduled emails. If an email is in draft, even though it's scheduled, it will not go out. So right now, this email is scheduled. If I leave it alone and don't touch it, it'll go out just fine at 9:30, on 9:29. If I come in here and I hit the pencil, the moment I click on this pencil, the email goes back into draft mode. So that's a really important tip. So if I hit this pencil and I say, oh, actually, it's fine, save and close, I have scheduled it and I've said ready for delivery, but now that I've edited it, it's back in draft. And so this date and time will come and go, and this email will not go out as long as it's in draft. So keep that in mind. If we schedule it and edit it, instead of saying save or just hitting back, even if I hit the pencil and I hit the back button, the moment I hit that pencil, it's back in draft, and you need to make sure. The only way it's going to go back into the queue to go out is if I hit ready for delivery again, and now it's back to scheduled. So if you ever go back and edit a scheduled email, or even if you just hit the pencil and then leave this page, hitting that pencil is going to set it back to draft. So you want to make sure that you don't, edit that way. You always want to make sure when you leave the page, you want to hit ready for delivery. That way, there's no chance of it being in draft. All right. So that's our, one more thing. So once we've sent an email, if we go down here and we look at this sent email that was already sent, once the email goes out, the icons for what we can do with our email will change. We can just hit this quick bar graph icon, which will give us a preview of, hey, we sent this to one person. Nobody has opened it yet. It'll give us, a quick glance at what it looks like. More importantly, where I usually jump straight to is this little blue reports icon. This is where we can get really, detailed information. So we can see, email results by status. So who got the email and who didn't. So if someone has a bad email address, or if it bounced back, or if they're choosing not to receive emails. You can also run reports and see who has and who has not opened your email. Again, this is mostly accurate. We usually see, somewhere in the ballpark of 90%, 95% accuracy. That's kind of a fluctuating number. But keep in mind that, it's not going to be a perfect result, but you can go in and see, especially if it does say opened, that you can trust. So if in this report, if it says opened, you can trust that they did open it. But if it says not opened, don't take that as gospel. The other thing we can do is we can remove emails. So you can click the trash can. Even if it's a sent email, if you hit the trash can, it will remove the email from this list, and it'll also remove the email from the view email page. So that's something else that I mentioned earlier, is that view email page. Let's take a quick look at that before we move on to some of our last topics. If we go back to our control panel. So while we're on the control panel, something we've probably talked about in other webinars, but you'll notice this button over here that says switch to view mode. When we're looking at our website modules, and you'll notice emailing is one of them, anything in the website modules means there is a front end for members. So, most of the things we've looked at for emailing, this is all admin only stuff. But if we click switch to view mode and then click on emailing, this will show us the member side of emailing. And this is what it looks like for members. So we can see there's our categories of emails that have been sent out. And then there's the emails in those categories that are allowed for viewing. And so I can go and say, hey, there's that email that was sent to me. And that's what the email looks like. It's just a little flyer. I can say, oh, I want to go look at the previous newsletter. Here's that last newsletter that I missed. And I can look at it on the website without having to go in and change that information, or without having to go into my inbox. So, if I accidentally delete the email or something like that, if it's an email that's allowed to be viewed, I can come back here and look at the email on this page. So that's our emailing module. The next modules we're going to look at is our text messaging and in-app notifications module. These I'm going to cover really quickly, A, because not everyone uses them, and B, because they're actually very similar to the emailing module. So they both work almost exactly the same. They just go to different places. Text messaging obviously sends out SMS text messages, and in-app notification makes phone notifications for people who have the mobile app installed. If we click into text messaging, it looks fairly similar to the way the emailing page looked. Keep in mind, by default, members aren't going to receive text messages. The only people who will receive text messages are those who have opted in. So when a member joins or when a member logs in, there's an option for them to, in their profile, opt in to receiving text messages. We also have this button right here that says notify members. So if you don't have text messaging enabled and you do enable it, there is this option to send an email out to all of your members who have not opted in yet saying, hey, we now have text messaging. Click this button to go, opt into text messaging. So we obviously don't want to send emails to people against their will. We don't want them to receive text messages that they don't want. But if they do like receiving text messages from your organization, when you send them out, you can hit notify members. It'll send an email out to everyone, and then they can opt in through that email. So once they've opted in, they'll start receiving text messages when you create them. The text message creation process is pretty simple. All you do is you just hit add message, and it's going to be very much like the email creation process. We can choose a distribution list. It has the same distribution list options as our email. So we can target the same exact people, or we can create a new list. So this works just like we saw in the emails. And then just as before, we give it a title subject. Obviously, text messages don't usually have a subject. So this is just for our own tracking purposes. So we can say, this is a, whatever scenario, whatever possible option we want to list as, the title of this text message. The members won't see that. That's just for us to keep track of. We can select a category similar. We can choose the same categories as emails, but again, this is just for us to keep track of. And then send on this date, so we can schedule text messages just like we do with emails. The big difference here is that our bodies are going to be slightly different. So the body is not going to be that full, featured editor like we saw. We get two options when we're sending a text message. We can send a link. So we can link to our homepage, we can link to our website, we can link to, upcoming events or photo albums, or we can even link manually to a specific URL that we want to send to. And then we can also include a plain text messages. Because this is going out as SMS, those are the only two things we can send. Now, we can send both. You can send a link and you can send a text message, and it will send both as a message. But it's not going to let you do things like font controls and stuff, because obviously as an SMS text message, there's not quite as many options for formatting. So you can't send like images and things like that. But once you fill in all this information, you just hit ready for delivery. And then just like with the emails, it'll either go out now or it'll go out on a scheduled date and time. And people who have opted into receiving text messages will get those text messages. Now, I mentioned this kind of up at the top, but once again, there is a fee for reserving a phone number for your organization. I'm pretty sure it's like $2 a month. It's not that much, but you have to keep in mind that every text message you send also has a fee. The pricing structure for that is available when you sign up, and I believe it's in our help system. Samantha, I can't remember if is that in our help system.
I believe it is, yes.
Okay, so you can find the pricing information by clicking on the little question mark over here, and it'll let you know how much each message. So if you send it to 50 people and it's a 2-cent message, that'll be $1, 2 cents per person you send it to. So keep that in mind. You don't want to send out hundreds of text messages, or it's gonna, those can actually rack up pretty quickly. But if you send monthly text messages for reminders for events, stuff like that, it's fairly affordable. And then similarly, we have in-app notifications. They work almost exactly the same. The only difference is instead of sending a text message to someone, it's going to send a notification to people that have the mobile device or the mobile app installed. And when you click add notification, it works exactly the same. You can send a link, you can send a text message, you can choose when it goes out, title. All of this is just like the text message, except for instead of receiving it as an SMS text message, they receive it as a notification on their phone from the mobile app. Otherwise, just like the text messages. So not a whole lot there. Pretty simple to understand as long as you understand the emailing tool. In-app notifications. Oh, one difference between in-app notifications and text messages. There's no fee. There's no added fee for notifications. So if you're trying to, kind of save a few dollars for your organization, mobile notifications don't have a per notification fee, but it does require that you have the ClubExpress mobile app. So if your organization has the mobile app, that's the way you get access to this, as opposed to the text messaging option. All right. I'm, of course, going to run out of time because there's so many things to cover, but the last thing I'll cover is going to be our system emails. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that. We'll do a little bit of Q&A. Thank you for letting me go a little bit over our normal webinar time today, but I do want to make sure that I talk about system emails because they are so important. So if we head over to our communications tab one last time, and down here under setup, there is a system emails page. This is a very important page to be familiar with. This is going to be, for a lot of people, an overwhelming page because there are lots and lots and lots and lots of system emails. This page goes on and on. There's so many of them. But the thing that's really, to keep in mind is, first of all, your organization probably will only use a fraction of these system emails. We just have a lot of emails in place to account for any particular scenarios. So when you're looking at this page, in the bold, what you'll see is the description of that email. And then below that text, you'll see the scenario in which that email goes out. So all of these are going to be emails that get automatically sent by the system based on actions taken by either an admin or a member. So if a member, makes a donation to your organization, they will receive a donation confirmation email that lets them know, hey, thank you for donating. We received your email, or we received your donation. If they sign up for an event, they will receive event registration confirmation emails letting them know, hey, you have signed up for this event. If they make payments, they'll get receipt emails, so on and so forth. There are tons and tons of scenarios in which we will let the member know, hey, we have, received this information. A question we get a lot of times is, well, I want to send most of these, but there's 2 or 3 that I never want to send those. Unfortunately, that's not really an option. With the way system emails works in the system, it's all or nothing. So, if there's a system email that you don't want to send for some reason, the easiest way to make sure that email doesn't go out is just to, make sure that that type of scenario doesn't, happen. So, for example, we have these e-learning emails. If we say, well, I don't want people to receive the e-learning email because we don't use e-learning. Well, that's a simple fix, because if you don't use e-learning, that email will never go out because there's no time for someone to actually generate that email. So that's kind of a case-by-case basis. In terms of like maintaining and editing these, a lot of people feel pressure. They say, oh, I need to go through and update each of these emails to be perfectly accurate. We set up all of these emails to be very generic, but also very succinct and clear. So for the most part, all of these emails will automatically adjust to have things like your club name and their name and the correct information. Most of these are fine the way they are. There are a handful of emails that you may want to go and massage and make look better. So you can pick and choose from this list and say, hey, anytime someone signs up for one of my events, I want to give them, a sincere thank you. And so we can go to our event registration confirmation, and we can go in here, and if you go over to the pencil for that email, this will give you kind of the broad strokes of the way this email looks. So this is just a plain text editor where we can go in and make, changes to this email, and we can say, this message confirms for registration with this club. If that's a little robotic for you, you can cut this out and say, hey, thanks, thank you for registering. We can thank them for registering. We can make changes to that as we like. Keep in mind, anywhere we see these little tags, just like when we were working with personalization before, anywhere these tags exist, it is going to automatically fill that in. Now, you can cut them out if you want. So if you say, like, I don't need my club name filled in, I can say, thank you for registering with, Northwest Balloon Club. And I can just manually replace that. I don't want them getting the full name. I'm fine with them getting the, the short name, the acronym for our club. But information like event title, we want to make sure to leave that alone, because that is going to be adaptive based on the event that they register for. If we have 20 events, this email might go out in 20 different scenarios. And if I change this section, then suddenly this email will no longer be completely accurate. We want to make sure to leave those alone for the most part. Additionally, if we accidentally edit one, if we say, hey, event title, and then we go, oh, that was an accident, and I type it back in, there's a solid chance typing this information out, there is code. So if we click over to the HTML, there is code behind these that is specific to them. So if they're not typed and if they're not entered exactly correctly, it might not work. So if you accidentally modify those, my recommendation, so if I save, let's say I do, let's mess this one up. That is obviously not going to get received properly. And if I save this, once I've customized an email and I say, oh, I know that I messed that up, I want to reset. Once there's a check mark that lets me know, hey, I've customized this email, we'll also get this little trash can out on the right-hand side. Now, some people sometimes get excited. They go, oh, hey, look, a trash can. I can get rid of that email. Ta-da. What this does, it doesn't delete the email. It deletes your customization. So if I click on the pencil again, we can still see that my typo and the things I changed are still there. If I hit this trash can, it resets that email. If I go back to my event registration confirmation, the check mark is gone. The email is still there. And if I click on this pencil, it has reset back to the base email. So if I'm ever having trouble with a system email, I can always just hit that trash can to reset it back to the basics. So that's our system emails. Another really interesting tool for system emails, we added this not too long ago. So this is a fairly recent upgrade, but the little wrench icon is fairly new. If I click on the wrench, we can change things for this email. So we can change things like the email subject. We can change the email address that this comes from. So this is going to come, normally these system emails come from your default email address that you'll find in your name and description in the control panel. But we can say, I actually prefer this email to come from my, events director at myclub.com. And I can also change the reply to address. So if someone replies to this email, instead of going back to the same from address, I can have it reply to a particular person if I want. And a really interesting option that people have asked for a long time, and we finally got around to being able to do it, is tracking open emails. Now, you do have to turn this on per system email and make sure that you're only turning this on for the ones that you really need that info for. But once you turn this on, every time we send a system email, we will track that for that particular email. So if there's a handful of emails you say, hey, I need to know when I send this email out, you can go in and turn that tracked email on, and it'll keep track of who opens that system email and who has been sent that system email. It's a good way for you to keep track of, who's doing what activities in your website. And then the last icon we get is this little mail icon. Just like with our emailing tool that we were looking at before, there is an option to send a test email. And so we can say, hey, I want to send this, this goes to Devin at clubexpress.com, and I can send a test, and it will generate that email to me. Even though I didn't do whatever it takes to get that email, it will send me that email as though I have taken that, that step. And it should, show me what the email will look like in my inbox. So just like when we're sending an email using the emailing module, we can test our customizations to make sure it looks right in our inbox. And so that's a really interesting tool. Keep in mind, if an email, so for example, event registration confirmation, it has information like event title. If I send a test, that test email doesn't have an event title associated. So I may just see squiggle, squiggle, event title, squiggle, squiggle. It may not autofill in during the test, but it should autofill in when it really, actually goes out. But because there's no event title information tied to the system when I send just a test, it might not come in, perfectly for me. Last thing to do on this page, up here at the top, there's two extra buttons. So there's this send system tag email test. This is just like sending the test for these, except for this is an email that has all of our generic system tags in it. So when you get it, it'll have things like, president name, president email, president, title, communication director, membership director, all of the different tags that your system will or won't send out that are kind of generic. This will send you an email letting you know, like, hey, all of those tags are working correctly. And if you see any tags that aren't working correctly when you send this tag to yourself, that means, hey, I need to go and update my system. So if it says, squiggle, squiggle, president name, oh, maybe I don't have someone set up as my president. I need to go update that so that my emails are accurate. And then we can also come in here and say, I have a default from address, a default from name. So this is going to change the from address, from name, reply to, and reply name for all of my emails, except for the ones that are customized. So if I say, I want all of these to come from, so-and-so at gmail.com, this will update all of my emails to come from that address. Obviously, for ones like these, if I go in and manually change it, these manual changes will override that default that I set up here. But I can quickly change all of my system emails just by changing the default one. I did just see a question come in now that I'm getting to my Q&A section. I know I'm over time by quite a bit, but if you want to look at the results of your emails, you can click right there to see, hey, show me all of the actions that have been taken. So this is all of the time that is recorded. So once you tell an email to start tracking, you'll get this extra little icon that looks like a little bar graph. And that's where you can go in and look at all of the people that have received that email and all the people that have opened it. And just like I mentioned before, keep in mind that not all of these, opened or not opened are going to be 100% accurate. If it says that they opened it, that is true. But if it says no, there's like a 2 to 5% chance that they may have opened it and they may just have their security settings in a way that doesn't report back to us. All right. Sam, are there any pressing questions? I know I'm well over time and I didn't save enough time for some stuff. We'll have to circle back to blogs and news articles here in a future webinar.
We had a lot of questions and a lot of similar questions. So I have a list of things to kind of reiterate. So we'll start at the top. Emailing distribution lists. So I wanted to remind everyone that you can add and exclude different groups from that distribution list that you're creating. So start to think creatively of how you can build the list when the list you want doesn't exist right out of the box. So Devin has an excluded category from his list there. So remember that you're able to do that. And you can, and another thing that came up was, usually when you're emailing your members, the distribution list is for active solo primary members or all active members, but there are several distribution lists that are available for expired members. And quickest way to do it, start typing in the word expired and pick your poison. Many of them will let you, choose something else like a specific date range, members who have expired within a specific range or will expire within a specific range. So that's an option. There were also a lot of questions about email cleanup. So we do have a webinar on non-member data cleanup, and we also have a separate option for general bad emails, and that's in our communications tab, and it's our bad emails list. We do have other webinars that go through how to manage those emails, including our emailing specific webinars and tutorials. So that would be a spot where you would visit those bad emails, badly formatted emails that may have bounced. You can view those there. There were a couple of questions about mailing lists. So to reiterate, a full mailing list cannot currently be deleted. It's something that our developers do know is a pain point for a lot of people. So when you add a new mailing list, you'll see that you'll have the option to delete it. But any other mailing list, so there's our little trash can for our fresh mailing list, but any other mailing list that has people associated with it or system mailing lists, cannot be deleted. There was a question, and Devin, I don't know if you have the answer to this. So are expired members excluded from emails that are going to a mailing list category, or would they still be included?
That's a great question. I'm pretty sure when you say members of a particular category, I'm almost certain it means active members. The default for most times, anytime you say, members who blank, it means active members.
Okay. And we had a great member tip, lots of great tips in the chat. So thank you everyone for that. But since you can't delete a mailing list category, one of the things that we use on our team a lot to sort of retire things that can't be deleted from the system is we add a Z to the title of it. It throws it at the end of your list. You don't have to look at it. And it kind of cleans up everything that you're doing. We do it a lot with custom pages, even though you can delete those. We like to hoard things sometimes. So you'll see Devin just added a Z to the very beginning of that category. It moves it to the end of the list. You can even add in big capital letters, do not use, if you want to discourage other administrators and coordinators from using that mailing list category, let's say when they're setting up events. So keep that in mind. And another question. So we talked a lot about email accounts, and there were a couple of people who wanted to review it, but just remember we have a copy of this session that'll be on our YouTube channel within a few days. One of the questions was related to replies to emails that are coming from your email address that are being handled by ClubExpress. So remember that when we set up these emails, they're forwarding only accounts. So the email is being forwarded and looks like it's coming from your specific email address, and it's coming back to your email. Now, the question was if a member replies to that email that's coming from what looks like your organization, where does that reply go? And unfortunately, I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I knew it at one point and I don't know it now.
So yeah, if you send an email out and it says, if I say, Samantha at clubexpress.com right here, if I send this email out, the reply is going to go to the same from address. So if I send an emailing out. And again, if I have, let's say if I have Northwest Balloon Club. So if I have Northwest Balloon Club, let's do in-season. No, let's do Prez at northwestballoonclub.com. So if I send this as an email coming from president at northwestballoonclub.com, if I send that out, anyone who replies to this email, the reply is going to go back to president at northwestballoonclub.com. Now, if Northwest Balloon Club or if president at northwestballoonclub.com isn't a real email address and it's set up as a forwarding address in our email accounts over here, again, I don't have that on this website, but if I set it up over here and I have this email forward to say 5 or 6 people on the board of directors team, it would then forward to their personal email addresses. So again, that would look like I send an email out for my emailing module and it looks like it's coming from president at northwestballoonclub.com. Someone gets that email and replies to it. That reply goes back to northwestballoonclub.com, which is handled by ClubExpress. ClubExpress then takes that email and forwards it to a personal address for whoever is set up to receive forwarding. But from that point on, let's say, the person who is actually our president has an email of, Joe Schmo at gmail.com. If that president replies to it, that reply itself is coming from Joe Schmo at gmail.com. It's not going to come, the reply can't come from, at that point, from that point on, it can't come from president at Northwest Balloon Club.
And another couple of questions about a similar topic. So blast emails and opting out. A lot of people mentioned that a lot of their members end up opting out of their emails through their member profile or when they sign up. So we do have a report which will show you members who don't have an email address, members who have refused email, so they've opted out of receiving blast emails. As a note, remember that doesn't include system emails. System emails, members can't opt out of those. So they're always going to get payment confirmations. They're always going to get event registration confirmations, things like that.
Oh, but a correction on that. Yes. If they opt out of emails, there will be some system emails they won't get.
Okay, yes. But payment confirmations always come through.
Anything involving money. So the reason for that is a lot of you may or may not know, like when you receive emails from a company or something like that, a lot of times at the bottom, it'll say like unsubscribe because there's a lot of laws around like communication handled by, what is it, the FTC, I think, or FCC, that say like, hey, if I don't want you to talk to me, you can't talk to me. We have to follow those same rules. And since it's coming from the ClubExpress email server, they can say, hey, I don't want you to send me emails, or I don't want like whatever confirmation. So things like, I think the event confirmation, even if they say I don't want emails, we won't send them the confirmation. The exception is anything involving money. So there are, the word loophole sounds dirty, but there are workarounds in those laws saying if someone pays for something, because we have to provide them with a receipt, we can always send them those receipt emails, but we can't send them things like advertising emails and stuff like that. So they'll get just about nothing except for stuff that involves money.
Thank you for the clarification. Very important clarification. And some people had the sort of gripe, I would say, that it limits the emails that their members are getting, maybe about events that you have coming up or anything like that. What you might see in a lot of organizations is the ability to opt out or in to specific types of emails. We don't have that right now. It's something that we'll forward to our developers as a suggestion, because a lot of you have mentioned it. One of the comments included a tip, which was a note at the bottom of initial emails going out to members, letting them know that if they opt out of emails, they'll opt out of all of it. And they've instead set up an ad hoc form that users can use to opt in and out of specific types of emails. So it's a little bit more work, but it allows you to really listen to your members and the types of communications they want to receive. And it enables you to get them just what they want to receive instead of completely removing them from the picture. So definitely kind of take a look at the options that you might have for workarounds. Email scheduling. So a couple of points about email scheduling, just to reiterate: when you schedule an email to send, you do still have to click ready for delivery. You won't have what a lot of people might end up doing. A couple of people had mentioned it was they click save when they scheduled that email for delivery instead of clicking ready for delivery. So the ready for delivery button seems scary. It's not going to send your email now if you have scheduled send. It seems like it's going to. We promise it's not. So when you click ready for delivery, back on the main emailing distribution page, you'll see in that status scheduled for delivery. So you can rest easy. It's not going out now. Now, if you think, oh gosh, I have to change a link, I want to edit this photo, it's okay because the email's not going out for a couple of days. When you go back in, you can absolutely still make changes because the email has not gone out yet. When you make changes to an email that's scheduled for delivery, you still need to click that ready for delivery button. It tells our system again, yes, we are ready to save this. So you want to make sure that you click that ready for delivery button. You'll see Devin didn't click the ready for delivery button, and now it's in draft mode. So when we go back into it, he'll go ahead and click that ready for delivery button so that his changes are good to go. And now it's scheduled again. So remember, when you're scheduling for delivery, that ready for delivery button is not your enemy. That's your friend. And another related to emails, email formatting and the dreaded copy and paste from Word. So we strongly recommend against copying and pasting from any item, whether it's a PDF that you may have, sitting in your email, even copying and pasting from another email. We recommend instead that you copy, if you have to copy text over, which many of you do, if you have to copy text over, we suggest copying it without formatting the way Devin is doing there, or you can copy it into a notepad or a text editor and it'll strip the formatting. The reason for this is, to put it shortly, email formatting and Word formatting do not play well together. And email formatting doesn't play well with a lot of things. So you want to apply styles to your email within the email. It might seem easiest to stick with a tool that you know well, like formatting your text and your options in Word and copying and pasting that over. It's going to create double the work for you because your format's not going to look great and you're going to have to fix things in the email anyway. So we strongly recommend recommend against that. There was also a question about fonts showing up in kind of a weird way when you format the email versus when you send it. So we dropped a link in the chat for web-safe fonts, and you can Google that and get a list of web-safe fonts. There are fonts that maybe don't translate so well. There are plenty of fonts that you might drop into your newsletter that another user may not have installed on their device. So they might see a more generic font. So definitely take a look at that web-safe font list and make sure that you're sticking with those fonts. They're fonts we suggest for newsletters and for emails as well. And the last thing that came up, and we talked about this a lot, is just seeing your email opens. So when you are, as Devin showed us just a bit ago, in system emails, you're only going to see that response icon if you are tracking those system emails. Now, the results icon is always visible in your blast emails, but it's only visible in system emails if you've turned on tracking opens for that specific email. Now, remember that email opens for blast emails do have a little report that you can generate, but email opens for system emails will open in a new page and allow you to view timestamp and individual information for those emails. So, and as Devin's showing here, you can view some really detailed info of when the email was sent versus when it was opened, if it was opened. And I think that about covers the questions. There's another question. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available on our YouTube channel within a few days. So if you aren't already a subscriber, hightail it over there and click that subscribe button because you get a little notification when we post a new video or tutorial. And I think that that rounds out our questions. Thank you so much for all of the great questions. I'll pass it back to Devin.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for hanging in there with me. I know this was quite a long one, and this was a lot of various topics, but again, we wanted to do this as kind of an intro of the capabilities of ClubExpress for new and onboard, maybe elected communications directors to kind of understand the capabilities of the system. Keep in mind, a lot of the topics we covered today, emailing and system emails, we have sister webinars and sister training videos that are more in depth on each of these. So, we spent 15 to 20 on each of the different topics, but there is, full hours out there of webinars with detailed questions and more time being taken on each topic. So this is a great starting point for communications directors. But if you're looking for, more details, I bet you there's a webinar out there with higher detail. And as always, if you have questions, you can always reach out to us and contact our support team, support@clubexpress.com, if you have trouble using one of these features. All right, guys, thank you so much, and we'll see you in October for our next round of webinars.